Tu hai un sacco di cose da dire su quello che sta succedendo. Ah, c'è Max Fritz. Aspetta, mi serve? Sì. Unmute. Ciao Lisa. No? Forse devi...
Ok.
Senti,
Sì, dove sei? Sei sotto a casa tua, della tua famiglia?
siamo nel salon di SIS. Da Lorenzo.
Ah, da Lorenzo, ha tagliato i capelli.
Facciamo tutto come se le cose fossero normali, però...
Ok.
Voilà. Allora, I am trying... Hi everybody. It's Francesca SIS here. So I'm just trying to understand how to have more. Lorenzo, do you know how to project more participants? Cioè, devi fare la roba un po'.
Si fa galleria in alto a destra.
Okay.
C'è una cosa così in 6 e in 9.
Okay.
Gallery view si chiama.
So I think there are people who have no video. Max, are you there?
Yes.
Hi, Max.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Can you hear me?
So before we start,
Yes.
let's. This is Lisa,
Hello.
the coordinator.
Hey, Serena. Ciao.
Hi.
Hey.
I cannot hear anything.
Hi, Eunice. So I would just like to wait a little bit until at least Susanna is connected, and if for general technical questions like who wants to speak, we can write here in the Zoom group chat your name, location, and affiliation, and Irene from SIS will take the order of the interventions. So please write here your name, location, and affiliation if you have one, or if you have many or whatever. So Irene from SIS takes notes of the order of the interventions. Okay. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm so happy. It's so amazing to see you, everyone here. Thank you for being here. Hi, Marcela. Hi. So, Marcela from Palermo, confined. We are also confined in Palermo. And, okay, great, fantastic. So, we are waiting for Susanna to join the meeting. Maybe you can start to present yourself if you want to. For example, Serena Perrone.
Hi, my name is Serena Perrone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm an artist that's based between Sicily and the United States. Okay. I run a small artist residency program in 𝘚𝘵𝘐𝑗𝑒𝘐𝑒.
Wow, wow.
My family is from, yeah. Right now I'm based in Atlanta, where I'm the head of the printmaking department at Georgia State University. Okay. So I do printmaking and sculpture and photography. Things like that.
Welcome, fantastic. Yes. So Noam, I don't know. You have,
should I talk about myself now?
Hi Noam, can you?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I do, I hear you. Do you all hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who is speaking? I don't know. Ah, sorry, I didn't see. Okay, yes. Hi, yes. Where are you?
Hello. I think I'm in now as well.
Sorry, in?
Yes, I can hear you. And you can hear me, right?
Well, so and so.
So
Yeah, I had just a bit of lag, but I hear you.
Okay. Where are you located?
I'm currently in Eindhoven now. I'm a student at the Design Academy Eindhoven in bachelor.
Okay.
And I'm just self-quarantined at home.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
just having remote classes. So it's just good to see you all with the topic, with my favorite topic.
Okay, great. Hi, Alan. I see you're there. Hi. Welcome.
Can you see me? I only see my name. Can you see my image?
I can't see you. No, I can't. We can't see you. I think
Going on.
maybe you have to. Yeah. No. I see Gaetano. Hi.
Oh, I see. My video has been blocked out for some reason. There you go.
Okay. Maybe. Luca. Hi, Luca. Hi, Alan. Yeah, now we can see you very well. Fantastic. So Alan is a professor of anthropology at New York University. He will intervene. He makes his this big honor to be here now.
My honor.
Sorry. Someone spoke and I didn't know what's happening. Okay, so we are trying to set the techniques before. Actually, I will be honest, it's my first time on Zoom, and to inaugurate SIS like that, it's quite interesting, I think, exciting. So I see that Susanna is arrived. Are you there, Susanna Gonzo?
Yeah. Hello.
Hi.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's maybe start a little bit. What do you think? Okay. Come si vede lo schermo adesso?
Ciao.
Ah, eccoci. Ciao Gaetano. Okay. Fantastico. So the seminar is multilingual.
Di quell'imbucato.
Lorenzo Mazzilli, another partner.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are.
Luke, where are you?
Okay, great. Much better. Thank you so much for your technical support. Okay, great. So here we are. So before, I would like to thank everybody to be here. It's really an incredible moment for each one of us in our lives, but especially if you are trying to launch an autonomous school in Sicily. It's really, I mean, even more interesting to do it in these special conditions. And so SIS, Studi Internazionali per la Sicilia, is a residency program for writers and researchers that I have been starting to build together with Lisa Wade, who is here since last December. And so the idea is to bring here a sort of education which has some kinds of, it's to build a new institution here, actually, fundamentally. And I have been teaching a long time in Paris, and also I've been in New York visiting, thanks to, invited by Arti some years ago. And then I decided to come back to my roots and to do something for this place. And so I met Lisa, who is from the US, and we started immediately to launch this project, this collective project. So, of course, there were two calls, an independent call and a thematic call for our residencies, to which we have been really fortunate, because many incredible people from all over the world answered. And so the general theme is politics of emancipation, is the general theme of the first cycle of residencies, which had to take place from April to July. I think that 𝘚𝘵𝘬𝘏𝘭𝘦, who won the fellowship, Politics of Emancipation, is here, should be here right now. And we made two fellowships, because of course it's not easy, you know, to, I mean, run this project alone, because actually it is now funded by my olive oil, come si dice impresa? impresa di olive.
Well,
Yeah,
crop.
I am an agriculturer also, not only a researcher.
In your case, I would say agricultural estate.
Really? Why?
The olive oil crop you're saying.
Yeah, so I came here and I decided to make oil and to fund with the money of the oil and of my this estate, how do you say, the SIS program. And so we made 2 fellowships. One was won by 𝘔𝘬𝘬𝘭𝘦 and one was called Resto in Sicilia. And it's a special fellowship for people who want to stay here and who wish to stay here but cannot due to the, massive emigration of people from the south due to the economic crisis, structural economic crisis, and Susanna Gonzo won it. So we decided, nevertheless, even though the conditions of the general conditions of the world are what they are, that it would have been a great occasion to test our capacity to build something transformative and collective and capable of of interpreting the present times. And the first one of the themes, of course, of our residency, of course, is climate change. Of course, is questions of economical, political economy, and also agriculture, politics of the South, also the Green New Deal, and also the Chthulucene and other assemblage of nature and culture, of ecology and technology. So what a better occasion to launch SIS seminars exactly with this theme of with this question of the transformation, of the actual transformation of our living conditions. And so with Donna Haraway. And Susanna has been studying Haraway for a long time, so what a better occasion to ask her to introduce us to this chapter, which we chose also because we are a multilingual institution, so we are also subjected to questions of translations and the circulations of text. And so chapter 4, making kin, Anthropocene, Capitalocene, Plantationocene, and Chthulucene, sorry for the pronunciation, but seemed to us easily accessible for anybody and also extremely timely for the times we're living in. So I will introduce Susanna, who is a linguist, has been involved, she studied at Verona, in Potsdam University, and she has been involved during her studies in various collective activities in support of women in Italy, Jerusalem, Berlin. She has worked in Jerusalem a lot, in Bethlehem, and she works with collectives, basically. But she's a linguist, so she focuses on how power relations and shape language. So since January of 2020, she lives in Palermo, and she's analyzing the activities of a collective, of a feminist, trans-feminist collective based here in Palermo. So actually, she was already here when the confinement started, and so it's really ironical that the fellowship is called Resto in Sicilia, so I stay here, yes, of course. And so, please, Susanna, I don't know what time it is. Of course, some technical information. So whoever wants to speak or intervene, please say your name, write your name in the chat. So Irene of SIS, who is dealing with the technical stuff, is there. Hi, Irene. Can take note of the order of your interventions. So I give the word to Susanna. Je te laisse la parole. Je switch en français pour les Français. Bonjour Cécile.
Salut.
Ciao from Paris. Hi Anouk, one of our residents. Welcome, Anouk Chambaz from Switzerland. Benvenuto operaio stampatore di Parigi. E ciao Luca. And voilà, ti lascio la parola, Susanna.
Ciao.
La lingua che vuoi tu.
Speak in English because maybe it's, yeah, everyone can understand. So thank you, first of all, for inviting me to introduce this seminar. Yeah, my name is Susanna Gonzo, as Francesca already introduced me. And I'm gonna say some words about my research and then start introducing Donna Haraway's book, Staying with the Trouble. My research at SIS will be inspired by the discussions and activities of a feminist assembly that I'm part of, that is regularly meeting in Palermo since this February. When the group was created, it was for a personal and political necessity felt by all participants. And we wanted to give shape to a collective environment for experimentation, sharing of everyday experiences and political action. Since the group is very new and is still discussing about its identity, I prefer not to talk too much about it for the moment. I am both a militant within the group and a researcher of the group for the SIS program. So this intersection gives rise to my primary question. What does it mean to be a feminist researcher? The figure of the feminist researcher takes distance from the typical research method. Her work starts from within. A feminist researcher can't look at something from the outside. She has to deal with the inside and the outside at the same time. She lives in between intimate process and political action. A feminist group itself deals with these two realities and works to erode the separation between them. How can the hierarchy between these two figures be overcome? Which kind of narration will enable this process? Which kind of language? What I will try to trace through my research and through my involvement in the collective's activities will be the language that will emerge from the encounter between different mouths, bodies, ways of thinking, atmosphere, interior and exterior spaces. I think it will be a language that transforms and is already in constant transformation. It is a language that is shared and comprehensive, but also polyphonic and often out of tune. The transformation that happens within the group happens also within the researcher. The world outside and the research itself are also transformed in the process. Transformation is healing. In this particularly difficult moment for Italy and the world, it has been very healing for me to take part in these collective meetings. It seems to be a source of healing also for the other participants of the group. Especially now, I'm asking myself, how can we find collective ways of understanding medicine, care, and healing outside of dominant patriarchal neoliberal standpoints? I'm also asking myself, how can we take care of each other? How can we make kin now that we cannot be present with our bodies for each other? Now that suddenly the world looks so different. The book written by Donna Haraway, Staying with the Trouble, that we are going to discuss today is a great source of inspiration to find answers to this. So why is the book particularly relevant to me today? I would call this book a companion book, as the feminist theorist Sara Ahmed defines those books that are that appear as physical presences in our lives, those books that accompany us through certain experiences and change us, becoming part of what we are. The curious thing is that the situation in which I was, in which I read the book last year, was very similar to the situation in which we are now. I had decided to isolate myself for an entire week, to disconnect completely from everything and everyone. And I wanted to take time to think through things deeply. And in those days, I decided to read this book. But what is the book about? It all starts by understanding that we are in times of trouble, that we live in an infected and toxic present, and we need to act responsibly. In the midst of spiraling ecological devastation, what Haraway proposes is a present in which human, non-human, and other than human beings cooperate, interlacing relations, getting rid of anthropocentric hierarchies. According to Haraway, the only way to survive in an infected planet is to create unexpected connection with each other. Staying with the Trouble is a collection of reflections, articles, case studies, artistic interventions, and stories, which are all great examples of how we can create such connections. Going back to the first question I posed on how we can find collective ways of healing, I would like to briefly introduce what Haraway says in regards to healing in her book. For Haraway, healing is a process that happens through presencing and representing past traumas and death. She talks about collective ways of mourning, which happen through inhabiting loss. Today, we are witnessing the loss of normalcy, the loss of physical connection, the loss of safety, and we need for the first time to grieve collectively because we are slowly realizing that these losses concern all of us. In chapter 3, there is a very beautiful passage that refers to a cartoon which portrays orchids whose flowers look like female bees' organs. The cartoon says, without partner, the orchid has resorted to self-pollinating, a last-ditch genetic strategy that only delays the inevitable. Nothing of the bee remains, but we know it existed for the shape of the flower. So the shape of the flower reminds us that the bee existed. We are going to live in a world that will probably look more and more like the shape of something that is no longer there. We're going to live in a world inhabited by carcasses of past social structure, past modes of living and thinking. We are already living in a world that is made of big losses and more will come. A world made of ruins, of the ashes of what was there and is disappearing in front of our eyes. What Haraway suggests is to live with these losses, to build our present among them. To try to answer the second question I posed, how can we take care of each other now that we cannot be physically present for each other? We could resort again to what Haraway suggests. She says that in times of trouble, we need to learn to take care without touching, without disturbing or invading the other. She talks about intimacy without proximity. She brings as an example the Crochet Coral Reef project by the Wertheim sisters, who were born in Brisbane near the Great Barrier Reef. The two sisters, an article on coral bleaching, started crocheting coral reefs to raise awareness about their destruction. They managed to involve about 8,000 people in the project, mostly women from 27 different countries. These people have come together to crochet in wool, cotton, plastic bags, and any kind of trash. Crafters made healthy reefs, showing at the same time the signs of pollution and global warming through the material they used to produce them. Through this project, not only was it possible to care for physically, it also weaved together a worldwide community between humans crocheting for a common cause. Nature brings people together in unexpected ways. Focusing now more specifically on the chapter we decided to analyze today, which is chapter 4, I would like to open the conversation on what making kin means in the time of the Chthulucene. What is the Chthulucene? The word Chthulucene is a compound of two Greek words, chthon and kainos, and it refers to a time of beginnings, a time of thick ongoing presence. It is the now infused of all temporalities and materialities. The Chthulucene is the time in which we finally learn that we are not self-sufficient beings. We are part of complex ecosystems to which animals take part. With the slogan, "Make kin, not babies," Haraway is trying to tell us that we need to engage in new kinds of bindings. bindings that are different from the usual ways of making kin that reproduce and are infused with capitalist and patriarchal values. We have historically seen the nuclear family as a safe, intimate refuge, the private as something that needs to be divided from the outside. Why can't the feminist collective be the family, the refuge? Communities that are outside the environment that we consider safe might be safer and more caring than the closed spaces in which we have been socially forced to exist within. According to Haraway, we need to create refuge with our kin in a world of ruins. We need to create safe spaces that are open and inclusive, rather than selfish, private, and only human. Kin needs to disentangle from the ties of genealogy and species, and feminists, as Haraway states, have to exercise leadership in imagination, theory, and action to unravel these ties. A last remark I wanted to make concerns Haraway's language, which is of particular interest to me, coming from linguistic studies. The way in which Haraway engaged with language is very inspiring, and I think a feminist research could experiment with her elastic way of treating language. She treats words as material assemblages of lively organisms that can be composed, and in her words, she creates new words. She uses words like kin, 𝘚𝘳𝘰𝘶𝘣𝘕, becoming with tentacles, trouble, reinventing their meaning. As she states in an interview about speculative fabulation, one of the ways in which she refers to her writing style, her words are untrustworthy, unstable, in constant mutation. Speculative fabulation, in a way, is a way of writing that concerns wild facts told through non-domesticated narrative. Also, her language does not know disciplinary borders. She's constantly crossing different disciplines, from biology to art to activism, letting them coexist and meld together. In her book, she talks about tentacular thinking as a practice of the Chthulucene. And to think tentacularly, we need a tentacular language, a language with no hierarchy that subverts subject-object relations and is open to unexpected contaminations. My research at SIS will focus on the way in which language transforms and is itself transformed within a personal and political feminist process. I hope it will create words that create new words. To quote Haraway, it matters which stories tell stories. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susanna, for your proposal. I would propose Alan Feldman to intervene directly in the conversation because, so Alan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Okay.
Okay, so I can, Alan is the author of Archives of the Sensible, of War, Photopolitics and Dead Memory, and Formations of Violence, among other topics. He works in political animality and critical race theory. Please.
Okay, thank you very much, Francesca, for inviting me. And congratulations on the new institute, and it deserves every support we can give it. And thank you for Susanna for a very interesting exegesis of a very rich and dense book. I want to say as a preface, because I will be doing some critique here, that I fully, in the present context particularly, I fully endorse Haraway's advocacy for a gendered form of interdependency. And the reason I point that out is because I've been in a prior conference I participated in. I have been very concerned because I have a significant number of Chinese students in NYU from the mainland with Trump's racialization of the virus by talking about it as a Chinese virus, his use of orientalizing metaphors that can mutate very rapidly and have already done so into acts of violence against people from that part of the world or appear to be from that part of the world. And I'm also very critical as someone who works of the masculinist response to the virus, the use of military metaphors, which have at their base the presumption of restoring an impermeable border, which I think is a masculinist concept, and a disavow, as we see, the emergence of new forms of nationalism, even the fragmentation of the U.S. into different states having to come up with their own respective emergency responses without no central coordination, and the emergence of nationalism as a kind of masculinist militarist response to the violence, as opposed to the promotion of global interdependency. And I think Haraway's essay is a major contribution to that ethic. I also appreciate that Susanna raised the issue of language and lexicon, because I want to talk about the concept Haraway deploys in the chapter, but after skimming through, I realized they also populate the rest of the book. The three concepts is the use of the term critter, which is American slang, C-R-I-T-T-E-R, and cheap extraction and species. And I have problems with her use in terms of the lack of historical and political contextualization. So I sympathize with her goals, I sympathize with her project, but I think a more reflexive relationship to some of the terms that she's using needs to be considered. So the term critter populates is used throughout the book, and it's uncritically. It originates as American frontier slang that refers to lowly, scavenging animals, and has in the American colonial project of the frontier extended to derided or stigmatized human beings, and as I said, is part of a colonial lexicon, as is the concept of cheap extraction. Cheap extraction has to be seen as originating with the colonial project and with slavocracy particularly. Both terms are associated with the violent subjugation. Historically, I know this is not Haraway's association, but both terms are associated with the violent subjugation of indigenous populations, Native Americans or Africans, and the destruction of the ecological balance of their support systems. The critter, the American slang term critter, is derived from the English creature, which also reciprocally is derived from the Latin creatura. Creatura in Latin is a thing always in process of undergoing creation and mutation. The creature or critter presupposes a creator and their radical separation, the author, the creator, and the created. The creature-critter presupposes the sovereign, as in Jacques Derrida's formulation of the beast and the sovereign. As an emergent form of life, it's tied to the concept of emergency as that which rises up from below, from primal slime, and whose emergence precipitates a state of exception and intervention, usually historically and in literature by a sovereign power. We can think of Shakespeare's famous play about Caliban, who was described as a creature. I'm hearing some noise coming from somewhere. Both the colonial and slavocratic legacies of the critter and of cheap extraction are not really engaged by Haraway. Colonialism and slavocracy were concerted drives to exclude kinship filiation that she's advocating for, and the interdependency of cohabitations. And these apparatuses certainly mediated the parallel and subsequent subjugation, enslavement of ecosystems and its flora and fauna. Recognizing this historical inheritance would compel a reassessment of the dithering, this is her term, that contributes to destruction of the biosphere, and rather forces us to look at the kind of anthropocentric sovereignty that claims the right to be without right in the destruction of the earth. So if I'm not using too much time, can I also talk about speciation here? Species is a term that Haraway also tends to use uncritically. And she's looking for, affiliations and kinships across between species. And here I think we have to think about the concept of kinship presupposes mutual reciprocal recognizability. And here I think we have to raise some of the issues that Jacques Derrida has raised in some of his writing, where he claims that ethics begins with the unrecognizable, not with recognizability. To acknowledge radical difference is not to reduce the different to the same. So he does not associate the ethical act with an act of recognition, which most ethical systems presuppose, such as Haraway's making of kin as a relation of resemblance, as a relation of resemblance and reciprocity. And her grid or interface of an ethic of recognizability is embedded on her reliance on the concept of species as a common substrate for an ecological salvage operation. Now, the ethic of unrecognizability of an animal rejects the law of the near and the far, which organizes the whole concept of recognizability. And I'm quoting here Jacques Derrida. What does he mean by the law or the rule of the near and the far? Quote, that one has obligations only to the fellow, be it the foreigner as fellow and my neighbor, which step by step, as we know, in fact, intensifies our obligation towards the most similar and the nearest. More obligation towards men than towards animals, more obligation towards men who are close and similar than towards the less near and the less similar, in the order of probabilities and supposed or fantasized resemblances of similarities, family, nation, race, culture, religion, end quote. In this context, animality becomes an ethical or the near form recognizable within and without the human subject. And historically, animal unfamiliarity is exploited to generate even more distant forms of the unrecognizable, as such as racialization, related forms of bestialization, and dehumanization, the animalization of the human. So I would suggest that Haraway's inventory of more than human, other than human, the inhuman, are all anchored in this, what I would consider to be an anthropological concept of speciation and its others. There is a very famous book entitled Who Comes After the Subject? Can we ask who or what comes after the species as a category of the subject? And I first encountered Haraway's use of speciation when she critiqued Jacques Derrida's and his famous essay of his encounter with his cat gazing at him when he stands naked in his bathroom in the book, The Animal That Therefore I Am. Haraway reads this encounter as Derrida's evident, and I'm quoting her, self-evident defaulting on a simple obligation of a companion species, end of quote. She describes this as a failed moment of potential cross-species communication that she narrates as a scientific, quote unquote, and biological, quote unquote, and therefore I stress an ethical and anthropological return of the animal gaze, the animals looking at Derrida and Derrida looking back at the animal. So the use of species is very similar to how she's using it in the current chapter. However, I would suggest that Haraway does not acknowledge that the stabilized subject position from which a cross-species capacity for exchange, collectivization, embodied in the term animal and related forms is exactly what falls into crisis in Derrida's analysis. So we can we question her assumption of species as what Gayatri Spivak calls a pre-comprehended collectivity as chunks of the real. Is species functioning as a pre-comprehended collectivity? A prior speciation as a support for Haraway's cross-speciation communication is one such pre-comprehended collectivity. And this returns us to the relation of the creator to the created creature and the sovereign, the beast. Does the concept of speciation presuppose a sovereign who exercises and speciates, exercises the act of speciation, assigns speciating identity to critters? for example. Is critter a form of speciation? You know, and then how do we account for the kind of negative history that's attached to the term? So I would like to just end by quoting Derrida in the same book. Here's Derrida talking, critiquing the concept of speciation. Quote, "I would like to have the plural animals heard in the singular. There is no animal in the general singular, separated from man by a single, indivisible limit. We have to envision the existence of living creatures whose polarity cannot be assembled within a single figure of an animality that is simply opposed to humanity." And in other parts of his work, speciation for Derrida is an apparatus of sacrifice insofar as it institutes and reserves the singularity of the human, feminist or otherwise, as mediated by the infinite substitutability of the animal multitude. So he doesn't like the word animal because he considers it a form of gross collectivization, which also applies to speciation. So thank you for your patience, and I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Alan. It was really very, very rich intervention. Is there anybody who wants to reply? Maybe Susanna, you want to? Dov'è Susanna? Maybe Susanna, you want to reply to Alan? Susanna, you're here or no? Or Luca? Che cosa si fa? Vabbè. I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough Haraway to understand if she presupposes like a pre-comprehended collectivity in the terms that you traced Derrida's insights. I think it is more a question. I think I understand the question of the language and like how to understand this interspeciation if the categories of the species are already in the language, and so we have to it automatically will exert some sort of power of normative power, and so all the questions of authority, hierarchy in the language, the subjugation of the language. Still, sorry, but still, I think, who is speaking?
Cosa sta dicendo quando stai parlando?
Non capisco. So I think the question of the unexpected connections between species is capable of somehow disrupting the categories of the language and of the species as such as we know them. Like, for instance, what we are actually undergoing with this COVID crisis, it was a result of an unexpected connection between species. It was, and not only between species, but in specific economic conditions, in a specific ecological condition, crashed conditions. So maybe we don't have the words to say that. Maybe there is something which the virus is revealing us of the possibility of somehow dismantling the logics of hierarchy between these species now. So we are actually undergoing a major transformation, which is some sort of doing what Haraway wishes in the 4th chapter and also in the whole book, somehow dismantling logical and normative relationships of power between species, because now there is something which we don't know who destroyed the crystallized order of the world. And so I think I think very interesting the idea of following Haraway when she suggests us to making new companionships, interspecies, but this interspeciesism is more, I would say, transspeciesism, because it transforms the species as such, and so everything becomes other. And so it poses when Susanna started saying that as an activist and as a researcher, she is transformed by what she lives. And I think the feminist perspective in Haraway gives us the possibility to imagine somehow of an emancipation from the knowledge of, from the categories. And it was time that modernity crossed like that. You know, it happened like that, actually. It happened, it is happening now in a biological way. So, I don't know, with the question of the animal gaze and the unrecognizable in Derrida, I think it is exactly this unrecognizable that is what Haraway is seeking to name, to articulate with science fiction. And it's there in this genre, in literature and in this speculative fabulation that, you know, somehow we can deconstruct and imagine new connections, unexpected connections, and not based on relations of resemblance, so on the notion of representation and what it brings with it. But, and not even, I don't know, there are specialists out there who can jump on this this question. I don't know if it goes towards a pre-comprehended collectivity. I think Haraway is well aware of the fact that she speaks from, I mean, the language of the rules of the language. And I think she is trying to really go beyond the idea of returning back to a world. I mean, this is absolutely not possible, and we are absolutely witnessing this. So more than a pre-comprehended collectivity, maybe to follow Derrida's notion of kinship. So, and producing new relationships signifies also producing a new ethics and a new politics, imagining a new politics. So
I thoroughly agree with you, Francesca, and I also want that project to be achievable too. I think Susanna was correct in pointing out the issue of trauma. And when I was pointing out the term like critter, which, I mean, if you're not a native speaker of English, it's a very, very loaded term and carries along with it a lot of trauma that needs to be examined. And if we're going to work goals, and going to, as Susanna had advocated, we do need to confront the traumatic archaeology of certain forms of language that we need to be very self-critical about. But in order to achieve that project, that's only my point. I'm not throwing out the baby, the bathwater. I don't want to throw out the project. I'm interested in looking at singularities, right? And understanding singularities in terms of how the representation of the singular can achieve a different type of description of our current situation and what needs to be done.
Yeah, maybe rather than talking about representation, because representation presupposes some rules, and we could talk about figurations. It makes me think a lot about Rosi Braidotti. I don't know if someone of you agree of Rosi Braidotti's notion of figuration, which is a way of visualizing possibilities, the possible, without falling into the grid of the representation and with all that it brings with it in terms of politics. Yeah, I don't know. So many things you suggested us. Does anybody want to introduce themselves and jump into the discussion? For example, Noam, you. Hey. Hey, Noam.
I hear you. Why particularly me?
Yes.
I mean, I just wrote on the chat to ask Ellen, like if...
I am doing that right now.
Oh, yeah.
Just give me a moment.
To the last
besides that, I don't really have a point. Maybe someone else can speak.
Yeah, because you said you are you know Haraway very well. That's why I
not like in terms of like highly sort of academic or philosophical level, but I mean my main practices are sort of design, like especially design fiction and speculative design. Okay. So I often like just, I don't know, appropriate her concepts and like terms. Okay. But I'm not very sure if that's like a topic that is like worth discussing in like sort of in terms of like philosophy.
But I would suggest to shift the discussion towards the present, what actually, because we are actually now creating new kinds of relationships. We wouldn't be here on Zoom if there wasn't this global emergency, this global crisis. So we are already, you know, making new kinships. So I would like to shift the discussion on the timeliness of Haraway. Maybe Luca wants to say something.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, please introduce yourself.
Yes, it's very difficult to introduce myself, but I'm Luca 𝘚𝘵𝘍𝘐𝑚𝑎𝑛𝑖. I'm PhD in European Cultural Studies in Palermo. I'm an activist. I live more with plants than humans in this period of my life, in the last months. And I want only to jump in the discussion because we are talking about production of relationships with other form of lives. I think we are, everybody already connected to a lot of form of lives. Our body, me, for example, I'm Luca 𝘚𝘚𝑚𝑎𝑛𝑖, but at the same time, I'm a lot of viruses, bacteria, and other form of lives in my body. But for an anthropocentric point of view, I'm Luca 𝘚𝘚𝑚𝑎𝑛𝑖, but there are many individuals of other species in my body. So I think there are already a lot of relationship, but human also with language, we have divided totally this relationship, and we are going now to rediscover something already exists. There is all the formal life are connected in a lot of kind of relationships, symbiotic, mutual, and so on. So I think we should think to the idea of divided life, the Agamemnian idea, which inside the language there are a lot of ontological divisions, since the Greek culture divide zoe and bios. So to become politics, human had to divide human life as politic from zoe, from the other form of life. So I think inside language there is a originary division. So I'm not so sure we should find inside creativity of language a way to reconnect this divided life. Maybe more radically we should think to go through or go over language. No, it's difficult for human beings who are possessed by language to go out from that. And in fact, we are always thinking to go out the language using the language. So it's like a loop, very difficult. But I think also we should try to put radically the problem inside the language. So I don't know, I think a lot of the possibility to open new relationships, real relationships, should start from a problematization of the use of the language as medium to continue to think. I know it's a bit aporetic, but could be an idea. Of course, it's not possible to talk about that with language, because if we are to point to the construct we should do this using language. So it's a territory we can't touch with language. So if this territory of new relationships is possible to be taught by language, is still linguistic. So for the moment, I think it's impossible for human language possessed being like us to do it. But in a way, I think language is full of division. It's a primary productor of divisions between form of life. And also the human life itself is a divided life. It's this raw life in which a part has been divided by language. Because of course, language has not superficially effect. It's a politically immediate effect in our way to live as human to live, and also on the relationship with other species. Of all species is a human category we create by language. Of course, it's a human point of view on other form of life.
Claudia, can you want to talk, Claudia?
Sì, aspetta.
Ok. Puoi parlare in francese, in italiano?
Posso parlare in qualsiasi lingua, non c'è nessun problema.
In inglese è meglio, però.
Ok, ci provo, sono un po' così. Hi, I'm Claudia. I'm Claudia Gangemi. I'm not a researcher right now, but I used to be. Right now, I don't know where I'm gonna be since this kind of crisis. We don't know really where you're gonna be. Are you all okay, by the way? I think it's a really important question. And I wrote the book like after it came out, and then I found out there was this seminar about this specific chapter, and so I had to reread it because I really didn't remember much. And like being in this kind of situation, there were a lot of phrases that were sent me in a really kind of weird way, and I wanted to know if you felt also this kind of I would say approach by Donna Haraway about like in all the chapter there's this kind of discussion about lo dico in italiano perché forse per me è un attimo meglio, perché lo formulo meglio. A me quello che risulta oggi in questa situazione che stiamo vivendo, soprattutto in Italia, di diciamo continua morte fisica delle persone in un modo totalmente, diciamo, potremmo dire arbitrario, ma arbitrario non è, perché sappiamo che il Covid ha un certo tipo di preferenza rispetto, cioè prende un determinato tipo di popolazione, che sono gli anziani, che sono gli immunodepressi, che sono persone che vivono per strada, che sono poco aperte, che non hanno certo tipo di sicurezza in un certo senso. E in questo capitolo Donna Haraway fa degli interventi che in un certo senso augurano che ci sia un certo tipo di diminuzione della popolazione in questo, come si chiama qua? In questo, diciamo...
She advocates for the, come si dice, for the diminution of population. She advocates.
Tipo,
yes.
He say if in un certo senso lei identifica questo tipo di, diciamo, di global change, di climate change, di terraforming, lei lo chiama, di trasformamento della terra per cause essenzialmente prodotte dall'uomo.
Ma in inglese, scusami un attimo. Questo lo sai dire?
Allora, inizia e fa una distinzione tra cambiamenti di terraforming che sono prodotti dall'uomo, che sono l'agricoltura ad esempio, e anche altri tipi di terraforming che sono prodotti dalle piante, per esempio, lei dice seed dispersing plants, quindi l'impollinazione delle piante che avviene naturalmente, che ovviamente cambia diciamo, la conformazione della terra. Poi, in un certo senso, continuo a dire che nello stato in cui ci troviamo oggi, quindi nell'Antropocene, molti di questi cambiamenti sono dovuti a un certo tipo di, diciamo, comportamento umano di totalmente eliminazione. Fa riferimento alle teorie di Anna Tsing, dice perché qual è lo shift tra Olocene e Antropocene? È questa totale devastazione di most rifugi, diciamo, spazi in cui...
Claudia,
sì?
per piacere. Da questo momento in inglese, così.
Ok. In the chapter, there's the thing that there's a quote from Anna Tsing, which is an anthropologist, I think. And she said that the shift from Holocene and Anthropocene is characterized by the whipping out of most refugium, so place of refugium of, in this case, bacteria, animals, refugees, all this kind of, let's call it displacement, that mines the balance between or kind of entanglement between species as a like world altogether, as a entity. And she said in this kind, we're believing this because there is no more turning back. So deforestation, desertification, there are no things that you can unmake. And then there was a moment in which I didn't understand really well because I couldn't believe, but she also refers to this kind of moments also, cioè, lo paragona all'estinzione dei dinosauri, questo Antropocene, in un certo senso. Quindi I think that in these chapters, and it really scares me in a way, there's a really strong claim for diminishing the human population because it will be good for the earth, like environmentally, the animal and thing. And now, yeah, I can understand where she's coming from. But now with the COVID, we are really seeing this diminishing of population, like incontrollabilmente. Quindi non lo so, è una cosa che a me diciamo cioè vorrei parlarne con altre persone. Scusate le doppie lingue.
Great. So actually you're asking, I mean, you're saying that Haraway advocates for this diminishing of the population, and now actually this is happening. So what do we do with this? So what do we do with this question? So somehow this terraforming, which is this process of which we are also undergoing, is actually against us, but at the same time we have to interpret it in a way that is sustainable for some of us. I don't know. I think we are switching in a more political kind of discourse. We cannot avoid where we speak from now. We cannot avoid the actual situation. So it would be useless to discuss about this text as only, as an intellectual exercise. And so what you're asking is that, what do we do with this, extermination, if this extermination is the actual way to get out of the crisis, the global crisis, ecological crisis, which is present now. So how do we understand this, this need? So, I mean, it's a great question that makes me think a lot. Do you, does anybody wants to, maybe Iga, she's new. Come?
Noam wrote something.
Yeah.
I wrote my name on the chat, like just to like throw one question. I mean, just regarding what Francesca just like said. I mean, in the design work, there's a famous trend forecaster named 𝘠𝘪𝘵𝘩𝘊𝘆. I'm not sure like any of you know her, but she recently described the like recent COVID-19 as a blessing for the planet Earth, and as a blessing for the planet Earth.
Yeah.
And I was feeling like uncomfortable by hearing it, but I couldn't like, I don't know, like very logically elaborate on like how, like where does that uncomfortableness coming from? So maybe like, I don't know, like I just want to hear sort of remarks from y'all about that comment that she made.
Yeah, that COVID is a blessing for the world now. Well, I don't know. What do you all think? Anouk, you're here. Anouk Chambaz. Maybe. I don't know.
Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a bit dangerous to say that COVID is a blessing for the planet Earth. I mean, I think I understand why or where this could come from, but it's very dangerous, because what does it mean, you know? It's I link it to the people that say that climate change is going to reduce the Earth's population, and this is a very, I mean, politically, this leads to consequences that are that I wouldn't agree with. But I mean, there is a good side to what is happening with COVID, and also there is a sense of unity throughout Europe, for example, because all of the countries of Europe are going through the same experience. And also, maybe I'm talking about the most daily things, but in Italy, I was in Italy when it started, and then I went back to Switzerland. And there is a sense of, there is something that happens to everyone, you know, regardless of your religion, of your age, and of your political convictions. And that is maybe something that could flourish in new possibilities and new ways of being together for a goal or something. So there is a positive side there. I mean, you can see it as a blessing, but saying the phrase, the sentence like that is also, I mean, just like that, without a context, without explaining, it's not okay for me. I find it very dangerous, and also not respectful for the people who are in pain because of COVID, you know, for their families or for someone that they've lost. But if this can open up new possibilities of being together, and to say it was Donna Haraway of becoming with, then this is a good time. I mean, it's an interesting time. But in Haraway, what I found also really interesting is how she talks about Anthropocene, and how she says I don't see it as an epoch. She says, I don't see it as an era, but I see it as a transition. And I think this gives, I mean, when I read it, it gave me the feeling that, oh, I could do something. It gave me the ability, it re-gave me an agency, because in front of climate change, often you are this is so big that you don't know what you can do. But if you see Anthropocene not as an era, but as a transition, maybe you have an agency again and you can do something again. Yes, so maybe that's what I can add to the conversation.
Yes, we are actually just witnessing the possibilities of the possibility of transformation in the only fact that we are here now is absolutely incredible. I know Max wanted to say something. Max, please.
Yeah, I think it is. I also think it's dangerous to talk that way, but from another point of view, because I think we have some possible insights, like a general conception of what means crisis, because for many young people, it's the first time they really feel crisis. We never had something like that in our lives. So older people know some difficult times, and I think it's good for everyone to feel real crisis, because we have to face a way bigger crisis. The climate change will get a crisis that no one has ever faced. And I think this sense of solidarity is very important. Although I think that the solidarity we now feel, and it's great what happens in many places in many different countries, but I think it's also connected to the fact that everyone knows when the crisis will end, that there will be an end to this crisis. So everyone says, okay, I can stay at home for some months or some weeks because I have to, but if it takes not months but years, if you don't know whether it will end, it gets a totally different discourse. So I think having this experience is very important, but then the trust many people are giving into science right now, that could be something that lasts, and that is terrible and for our. The dangerous part I see in this comment is I hear it in many parts, like in German newspapers. You read recently, you read a lot of articles about the air in China is getting better. I don't know, the swans are getting back to Venice. I don't know, many of these stories, some are true, some not. But this gives you the sense that we do something for climate change, not doing anything. And I think that's very, very, very dangerous, because we have to do many more things, not just, I don't know, wait that something gets done by nature itself. We have to change. And this is kind of the maybe transition thing you talked about, like with the transition, like that, to see the Anthropocene as a transition. I think this may be a connection. Thank you.
Okay, Lisa, thank you very much, Max. Hey, Lisa.
Yes, I just had some things that sort of jumped off the page while I was reading Haraway, especially this, the phrase that she was writing in the introduction. And I think we're forced to recognize at the moment that the greatest planetary reformers, that is terraformers, are bacteria and their kin. That really jumped out the page when I read it in the introduction. And that very specifically can be referring to the virus that we're encountering now. And another thing that I thought was interesting was the idea of her techno fixes. I think we're experiencing now a lack of faith in techno fixes, and we're faced to acknowledge the seriousness of this trouble at hand. Techno fixes, when I say that, I intend the lack of equipment that's required to face this epidemic. We don't have enough respirators. We don't have enough tests. In America, it's especially grave. And I think I would like to formulate a few questions that perhaps we could discuss. So how do we stay with this specific trouble, the trouble of COVID? And how do we enact recuperation and recomposition that is culturally, politically, and biologically after this fact or during the fact? If we're to stay with the trouble, we're not to think too much about the future, but the present that we're in. But of course, what we're doing in the present does affect our immediate future. So I just want to put that out there. Do you have any responses to that?
Who wants to reply? Se vuoi, l'associazione di volontariato, non so chi sei, ma chiedi di parlare in italiano, puoi benissimo intervenire. Pronto? Ci sei?
Sì.
Ok, ciao.
Ciao.
Ok.
Grazie.
Figurati.
A tutti, sì.
Vai, parla.
No, niente, io sto ascoltando, solo che siccome non parlo inglese, magari ho capito qualcosina, però volevo seguire di più, ma non posso. Se continuate a parlare troppo in inglese, io esco, vi saluto e vi ringrazio.
Bruno, sono sicura che Bruno ha qualcosa da dire. Bruno, che ci sta guardando? Dov'è? Eccolo.
𝘔𝘅𝘵𝘩𝘶 also wrote maybe to reply.
Aha, Younes, okay. Younes, you can...
Yeah. Yes, let me react on your question, Lisa. So I do agree on the short term there are the technological fixes that need to happen, but that is a very short-sighted vision. It's like fixing terra, the land, with chemical fertilizer. Sometimes you might need it. Sometimes you might need antibiotics, but you do want the kin to collaborate with you. So we should really focus on restoring our kin of our microbiome, the virome as well. Like one of the other participants already said, we are viruses. 7 to 8% of our DNA are viruses that are looking some way to collaborate with us. And if we don't provide the hospitable environment for these viruses as well, we will never establish mutual relations with them as well. And at this moment, the virus is a language that is trying to communicate with us, and we are not communicating back with them. So that's more or less, without, of course, not acknowledging all the things that are happening around us and the suffering of the people, but we should also really see to how do we create a new kinship within our own ecosystem, and this ecosystem within our body then reflects the world around us as well. That's it.
A lui? Digli qualcosa a lui. Allen? Allen? Unmute? No? No. Why? Why is it not working? It's not working? Okay.
Okay.
We are.
You hear me now? Yeah, Tukan, on the last point, I agree. They described these technological fixes vis-a-vis the virus as a mitigation. So, for example, Trump has mandated $5 billion for mitigation of the impact of the virus in the US. And experts have said that if the $5 billion had been mobilized for prevention, right? For preemption and prevention, it could have financed global prevention epidemic centers and technologies for the entire globe. This is one of the estimates that has come out on that. So prevention versus short-term technological fixes. On the issue of using the virus for ecological engineering, I put on the Jews Butler once asked Agamben if he supported the death sentence for Adolf Eichmann, because they were talking about Hannah Arendt, who did support the death sentence. And Agamben's reply was, who am I to hand out a death sentence? So the question for me is, who are we to recruit the virus as an instrument of ecological engineering? This logic, historically, again, was used against Native Americans when colonizers, white European colonizers, gave them blankets infected with smallpox that killed thousands and destroyed cultures. So there's a historical precedent for this. So we have to think about that before we begin to applaud the mortality rates that the virus is producing.
Dov'è? Dov'è? Chi è che vuole parlare? Who said something? Okay. Yes, I agree. I agree with you. I fully agree, of course. But I know, now we are facing a situation which has been some sort of called. I mean, this situation. Some theorists and some feminists have advocated for the decrease and somehow for this situation, but in some extent, I would say that in the logic of the capitalism or the anti-capitalist theory, I would say that accelerationism can be put in parallel with this point of view. The idea of accelerating all the processes of capitalism, and so also the process of destruction, auto-destruction of capitalism. We could say that, we are in an accelerated frame of time now, in a accelerated time frame where, and also space-time, where everything is collapsing. And so all these theories, also the accelerationist theories, are actually being realized now, right? So it's a fantastic moment to also to verify our apparatus of critical apparatus.
No question that the virus has had a more accelerated time frame than human society, and this is what this is where the destruction lies.
You remember, we were in a presentism. We were in this sort of crystallized present, and now all of a sudden everything accelerates in all sorts of ways. So everything accelerates following also what we said, what we thought would happen, the collapse of this capitalist society. I would focus on capitalism because, of course, it is one of the main forces which that have brought us to this situation. So all of a sudden, this acceleration asks us to rethink and to our categories. Because, so what can we use to think the present moment? So how can we think the present moment while we are living it? And also, we are not just subjugated to it, but we are interpreting it, or we are leading it in some way. So it is actually a good occasion for us, and also in social sciences, to be challenged actually by reality, right? Yeah.
What interests me here, as someone who lived through the AIDS pandemic and actually worked as someone developing AIDS intervention programs, at that particular point in time in the late 80s and 90s, it was discussed that human ecological destruction and penetration has exposed or created an interface between humans and animals and viruses that previously we would not have had any regular contact or any contact with at all. So this was discussed back then, the ecological origins of the HIV/AIDS pandemic. And it seems to have been utterly, it's really interesting in the current discussion how that pandemic's almost been historically erased. And then some researchers have gone too recently into the so-called Spanish flu of 1917, which was really had nothing to do with Spain, and how when you look at the historiography of World War I, very few historians of World War I mention that influenza which killed millions of people on a global scale. So there is a kind of amnesia that we have to deal with here, and this is not that unprecedented. And Saskia Sassen has also talked about global warming and the thawing out of the polar ice caps, which are exposing into the destruction of the permafrost, exposing viruses that have been in the earth in a frozen, suspended state for thousands or even millions of years, which are now can possibly circulate. So the interface between ecology and the viral epidemic is particularly strong, but it does demand historical perspective, you know, maybe to build up levels of consciousness. And again, variation becomes crucial here.
Io esco.
Volevi dire qualcosa? Sì, fare una domanda. Yes, Lorenzo wanted to say something. Dove siamo?
Just a comment and a question, but before I must say I sympathize with those who are a bit tired of trying to find opportunity out of crisis. I remember in 2008 how many events and debates I participated in that began by discussing the Greek origin of the word crisis and the fact that it contains with it an opportunity that is for us to seize, so on and so forth. And I think it's legitimate to say that this kind of vocabulary maybe is a little bit out of date. I don't want to make any moral comments, but it's a little bit out of date to be replicated once again at the present time. But there is something about what Francesca said about the exit from presentism that I think is correct, and I don't think in contradiction with what Alan just said about the not unprecedented nature of an epidemic. What is to some extent unprecedented is the interruption in the daily life of hundreds of millions of people and the complete mobilization of societies. That was not necessarily the case with the AIDS pandemic. We have an interruption of an economic system, of a social system, of a relationship system on a scale that is unprecedented for Western societies since World War II. Then there will be a whole discourse to be made about societies that have not lived the end of history in the 1990s and how it is not unprecedented, such large-scale upheaval for them, but that would open up a different discussion. But at least for the West, it is true that the level of total mobilization that these weeks are showing us is something new, and it is something that opens up certainly an opportunity for shifting some of our course of action and some perhaps of our ideas and the tenets that govern our living together. And in that sense, I have just one quick comment and one quick question. The comment is about temporality, and it relates back to something that Alan said before. We're seeing now this gigantic response to a threat that triggers fear. It triggers extraordinary emotions. This response is justified in its vehemence, in its totality, and yet it's a very short-term response. It's a response to an immediate threat that's in front of us and that's blasted by the mediatic system on a daily basis into our ears and computers and telephones. We don't have, as humans apparently, a similar capacity to respond to threats that are not so immediate and to unleash the extraordinary power of fear as an emotion for threats that are not banging at our door right on the very day that we are living in. When we look at the moment, all the crocodile tears about the cuts in public services and welfare spending that are a good part of the reason why countries are unable to cope with this virus and cure those that are falling ill. We were never really very afraid of welfare cuts when they were happening. We're afraid now, a posteriori, of something that happened and that triggers a state of emergency in the present time. We were not afraid when that potentiality, when that state of emergency and that fear was a potentiality and not yet an actuality. And the same argument you can make about climate breakdown. We know that what is happening now is just a gigantic rehearsal for a much larger crisis to come with climate breakdown, but that potentiality of a breakdown is not triggering in humans as a species a similar level of fear and a similar sense of being threatened and a similar sense of requiring a response that is total, at least to the extent that we are responding now to the virus. So maybe one of the learning points that we need to get out of this crisis is that our temporality is fact, and that we really need to be able to not only think the longer term, but feel the longer term, and not just mobilize our emotions, including the emotion of fear as a very potent one, just when the time is too late to actually take any action, but palliative measures or adaptation or mitigation of the damage. The question I had listening to you, I guess I can show you like this. This is a plant, and while you were speaking, I kind of wished that my perceived otherness towards this plant, whether actual, real, or justified or not, whether my perceived otherness towards this species could trigger a level of kinship amongst us as the others of the plant, even buying in the kind of paradigm that we're trying to undo. But what seems to me to be the case is that that's unfortunately not really happening. And the virus in this case is a good starting point, because there is nothing that defines us as a common humanity than a virus that knows no borders, that attacks anybody and everybody, and everybody, that shows the radical interconnectedness and interdependency of our political and social system, that shows how a lack of healthcare standards in one part of the world impact health levels all over the world. And yet we're coming out of this crisis not with the sense of belonging to a common humanity, but on the contrary with nationalist belief. We know that democracy has been suspended in Hungary. We've seen what the Indonesian president has said just this morning, asking the police to shoot anybody who leaves their homes, so on and so forth. We know from Gramsci that a people, a demos, is constituted through its own mobilization, that demos doesn't precede its own calling into action, its own mobilization. And if you like, the climate crisis before the virus today, in a certain kind of via negativa, could potentially preconstitute such a demos, in the sense that we're all on the receiving end of a threat that is addressing all of us as a single humanity, differently from this plan. I'm trying to get the best out of the pre-Donna Haraway paradigm, but this is not happening. So my question to you is there any chance that even our binary thinking when it comes to humans versus nature, at least through a crisis such as this, might lead us to perceiving of ourselves as somewhat more united in our global interdependency than we have thought ourselves to be up to the present, and that perhaps leads us to thinking...
Cos'è che ci vuole vedere? Tu spiavi di dietro, perché si vede. Si vedono.
So, who wants to react with the plant? Who wants to react? Bruno, where are you?
Bien. Mais j'ai eu du mal, donc c'est 2 minutes que je vous écoute.
D'accord. Tu veux répondre à ce qu'a dit Lorenzo maintenant? Salut.
Non, il faut que je comprenne un peu mieux tout ça, c'est trop tôt.
J'ai appena arrivato.
Ouais, d'accord. Okay. Yes. And Serena, maybe you want to say something?
Allora, purtroppo ci sono gli operai che sono arrivati a casa mia per pulire le grondaie, quindi mi dispiace che c'è un rumore pazzesco in questo momento sul tetto, non era una cosa prevista, ma se mi permetti di parlare in inglese, non lo so, è meglio in inglese?
Meglio, certo.
Ok, allora, so I'll switch back to English. So, you know, I've been thinking about this idea of, you know, the theoretical point of view of the need to visualize other possibilities. And I guess, you know, the overarching question that I have, you know, when I ask this question to myself, like how are we to visualize other possibilities without the automatic tendency to seek representation and to seek similarity, and I think that without recognizing representation, it's very hard for us to visualize a possibility other than what we sort of like automatically default towards. And so, you know, I'm feeling a bit pessimistic here in the United States at this moment in time, because I think politically, while many of us sense this urge to seek kinship, the global powers that be are almost forcing wedges into that even further, obviously, for political and capitalistic reasons and other reasons that are extremely dark. And so I think that, you know, the same way that in our own ecosystem, within our own bodies, we have to find this balance between the symbiotic relationship between ourselves and the bacteria that we have within us. You know, we have to find this type of balance, because, you know, starving one leads to the overpopulation of our body with a bacteria that is parasitic or causing us harm. And I think that finding that balance between the difficult tendency of us that, you know, we want to be self-sufficient in this time. You know, we don't want to necessarily rely on this system of globalization where, you know, some of the essential things that we need, we can't obtain because they are manufactured somewhere else. And so there's this extreme tension between the desire to sort of recognize a leveling of a playing field and seek kinship that doesn't know any borders, and trying to sort of like balance that with the sort of automatic desperate sense of becoming even more self-sufficient. And I think that tension, you know, we're really like on this practice where, you know, if it goes too far, then the idea of kinship can never be grasped. And then if it goes too far the other way, then, you know, our ability to be self-sustaining can also be put in continued danger. And so, you know, this sort of like pendulum swinging back and forth a million times a day through many of our minds and our sort of our fears, and the way that our imagination sort of goes through these cycles and sort of plays out these scenarios hypothetically, but not so hypothetically, because, you know, it's actually, you know, like someone else was saying, you know, time is being compressed and accelerated, and everything is happening so quickly right now. And we're really seeing this microcosmic and macrocosmic situation that's both real and metaphorical. So I'm wondering, you know, like how can all of the species sort of start to understand kinship, you know, in the way that Haraway proposes, and in a way that's truly beneficial to us, not only in this moment, but can lead to this transitional way of thinking, and can lead to a new way of existing with this philosophy of kinship in the forefront of how we reconstruct, or not even reconstruct, but construct something new, if we're able to after this sort of subsides, and also in preparation for the next inevitable situation that comes up. So I don't know, it's a lot of rambling, but that's sort of what these discourses are highlighting in my mind, not only the Haraway, but, you know, a lot of the other things that I've been listening to and reading over the past few weeks and months. How can we find this kinship, and for those of us that find it and see it, how do we narrate that, and not just narrate it, but bring that in a tangible way to people that aren't seeing it or aren't willing to view things in this way. I think it might be impossible. So I am feeling sort of pessimistic in that regard. I think also because the United States, obviously, it is so diverse. There is so much difference that I think that in a place like this, it's even harder in a way to find and to feel kinship culturally, because there are so many different strata within this territory, like within this geographic location. So I'm curious to hear what people think about that as well.
Thank you. Yes, we are actually, I think we are already doing these unexpected kinships with the technology, actually, with this way of being it's a sort of intimacy without proximity. It's so it's kind of, we are reinventing our humanity in this way, like acknowledging actually our interconnectedness. We weren't perfectly aware before. I mean, we were aware of that if you think as workers, you know, smart working, which now is going, I mean, what we are doing, it's some sort of a smart working, which now is being used as a way to escape the situation of in which we are. But actually, it's a process which crosses all the 20th century. I mean, technology is the way we as workers have been transformed during the whole century, with communication, with entering the era of visuality, of global interconnectedness, and so on and so on. Maybe we should come back to Marx in the Fragments on the Machine, when he writes about the general intellect, and so this collective intelligence, this collective intelligence and creativity, capacity of producing, capacity of transformation, capacity of building the world, and reappropriating of these same instruments we have been using until now. That's basically what we are doing right now. So I think this is a way to create new kinships, and we are experiencing that now in this moment.
Yeah, I agree, and I feel like that is you know, truly a positive aspect of where we're finding ourselves at this moment in time, and I'm hoping that that will be something that will continue to lead to sort of the positive formation of kinship, you know, in the way that you were saying.
Yeah,
I think it's happening both quickly and also slowly right now. I think this push and pull is really it's very, very palpable, at least where I am right now.
Yeah. Noam, you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to mention that I find it questionable of relating the increased use of technology to kinship, in the sense that if you see, I mean, to talk about the infrastructure level of who provides the technology that we're using, like apparently we're on Microsoft Zoom, and
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to point that out, that, I mean, by enhancing the intimacy with the technology, in a way we're sort of making our way of interacting more centralized to Silicon Valley.
Sorry, I didn't. Can you repeat, please?
Yeah, I mean, by forming a more intimate relationship with technology, in a way we're centralizing the way that we interact to the server room of Silicon Valley corporations.
Yeah, of course this is a problem. Of course this is a question we have to address. So who owns the means of production of this global transformation? Of course it is a question. Yeah, Alan.
Just very briefly, there have been discussions to the degree to which Zoom is collecting data from these type of sessions and meetings. So, you know, kind of surveillance capitalism is alive and well during this pandemic. And these are the issues that we have to begin to engage and how it impacts on democracy and freedom of speech.
Yes, of course it is. Yes. So the infrastructure of kinship is something we have to think about. What's the general infrastructure which enables us to do these unexpected kinships? Yes, exactly. So capitalism is prospering. I don't know if you can say it in English right now. Some way it is. But let's not do what we did in the 80s with you know, when Boltanski and Capello write the new spirit of capitalism. Let's be aware that all the extraordinary production of the 60s and 70s, which led actually to the shift to the neoliberalism and also to the restructuring of capitalism on the basis of our relational capacities, and also on the basis of the requests of the workers in the intellectual industries. Let's pay attention to this. Yes, I think this is it's a moment of a shift. It's a historical shift where we have to avoid the subjugation of our production, knowledge production, which we're doing now, from the capitalist forces. That's for sure. I think we can think about the 80s as a moment in which we had a laboratory also of what we are living right now from that point of view. So when they say capitalism is dead now, you know, you read some comments and you read some articles like, let's pay attention. It's not exactly, it could be, but it is not until now, unfortunately. Yeah, Luca, I think I see your.
Cecile, maybe she wrote something.
Yes, hello everybody. I just wanted to make a point on the access of technology, because for me this period shows, and it is widening the numeric fraction. I don't know if we say so, we can say so in English, but my question is, how do we do with people that actually don't have access to numeric and to kind of, they can't like bind with the digital that we privileged people have. So for me, I don't have the answer, but because I've been questioning myself a lot about how the social links will go on, and this is the central question for everybody in every kind of tous les milieux sociaux, in every social I don't want to say classes, but milieu. I don't know how we can say that, Francesca.
You can say milieu.
Milieu. So how to also reinvent this social link? And for me, of course, the mean can be technology, but it's not for everybody. So this is everything is very visible right now, like the inequalities. It's very, very visible because there's people with whom we can't be in touch anymore because they don't have access to technology. So how do we respond to that? So it's going to be like, for me, like a big issue. And if this has to continue, like, how do we do that? How do we imagine like a new link through technology and virtually? Because I think how I can experience myself, like professionally speaking, when I talk with people that are precarious and that don't have like an easy access to technology, it's, if we had like no relation before that moment, if we hadn't built like a strong relation enough, this moment of even really precarious phone calls couldn't happen. Okay, so I understand, Francesca, when you say that maybe we can reappropriate the tools that helped us and now to transform it and become like the way you were explaining before. I really understood it, but I don't know how now to retell it. But anyway, maybe you understood what I mean.
Yes.
It's going to create inequalities even more. So how do we do with that? This is an open question. We don't have the answer for sure because it's a big moment of uncertainty, but we have the chance to be in relation with the people we love and people we don't love in other way for sure. But yeah, this is like our system. That's how I can see, I can feel like personally that our system is completely collapsing because there's going to be like a really, really big numeric fraction. That's it. That's just like my thought.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, that's for sure. So we are also experiencing the interconnectedness between the different realms of like social life, biological existence, economic conditions, genre and race and class intertwinings in the experience of this crisis. And so also these intersections of discrimination and social position in this moment are, maybe they are exposed. They are particularly exposed, that's for sure. But how to, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a big, big question. I don't know if someone wants to react to this. Maybe Luca wants to react to this? Yes. Here you are.
Yes, no, I was reflecting about our condition now as separated bodies, as cybernetic loneliness. We are talking during 90s, there was this rhetoric of the network, of the big possibility of the informatic revolution. I remember an interview of with Tony Negri and Gilles Deleuze. Tony Negri was asking to Deleuze if the new information society would give the possibility to the people to talk, to give the minorities the possibility to talk, and if it was possible to imagine to figure out a new communism as transversal world in which minorities, through the new technologies, was able to talk. And Gilles Deleuze replied to Tony Negri as he told, it will be not the possibility to talk more that to which help the end of capitalism, because maybe the problem Deleuze told is maybe inside the language, inside the word, and he talked about parole pourrie, the rotten word, because the language of the word he told is like rotten from inside, it tells, from the money and capitalism. And yes, you were talking about the general intellect. Yes, maybe this moment could be an acceleration of the moment in which capitalism adds all the interactive relational forces, strengths, and of the societies. So we should reflect about it, because now we are in a condition in which, because the virus, we are all separated. We only have the possibility to have this communication in which bodies, in a way, are excluded, but in a way, of course. And I think this is a bit scary in general. It's scary because I think the proximity of the bodies is a revolutionary aspect. I think is very important. So I don't know. I don't think this will be the end of capitalism. I think we will have another restructuration of the capitalism, and also the idea to use the medium in different ways. I want to remember again the idea Positivo, what is a device in which he says is not the way you use the medium, the device, because the device has a shape, has inside a lot of stuff you can't go through, you can't go over. So in general, I'm afraid, yes, of this distanciation in a way, body distanciation and hyper connection at the same time. So we are connected in which way? What we are doing? What we are? We are like small picture, like a syntax of images. Francesca, me, Lisa, Noam, Alan. But at the same time, I think this could have, especially in this moment in which this is not a choice, but is the only way to talk and to be together. And also the digital divide. Don't remember who was talking about, Cecilia.
Yes.
Yes, the digital divide, yes, I can understand totally. Also, it's a general problem of divide, of economic divide in this moment.
Yeah.
Who has the possibility to accede to the technology, who has the possibility to accede to a house, to stay inside. This is a general problem in an economy. And yes, but yes, so it's very difficult situation in which the past has been like compressed, and now we are projected in this very fast present in which we have to think, to find a solution, to find new frames in which to stay together. But I think we have no choice. I think this is the only way we can stay together, to think, because if not, we are nothing. We disappear in this state of exception that took off us all the freedom, also the one to go outside and to see our cities and to touch the floor of the cities. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Luca. Yes. Someone wants to react? Fallon, maybe? Hi, Fallon.
Hello. Excuse me.
Nice.
Well, I'm sorry, I just arrived in the conversation, so I'm still taking everything you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, the question of the interconnectedness, which is central in the Haraway's text, is exactly what we're experiencing. And I think a lot of things emerge right now, especially Cecile was talking about, yes, the increasing of differences, which is emerging. And yeah, how will we react to this is a big question. If, as Luca says, connection is the only way and proximity is the only way to build an emancipatory collective. So it's on this field, on the field of the techniques and the technology and the infrastructure that we should focus if we want to transform theory in practice, and if we would like to shift from critique to politics. So yeah, I don't know if anybody wants to intervene, want to say something, maybe Susanna?
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay, sorry, I had some technical problems. No, I was maybe thinking that it could be interesting now if some of the participants want to, I don't know, I was thinking maybe someone is involved with any kind of practice that resonates with Haraway's perspectives. Like, for example, Noam at the beginning say that he's using her language as inspiration for his practical or artistic work, and maybe, I don't know if he wants to say something about it or if someone else maybe wants to I don't know, explain their own practice and how it relates to Haraway work in some way.
Also, Younes has something to say, I think, for he does experiences with his own body, I guess, if we can say it, right? So, yeah, please, Noam.
Yeah, do you want me to react on that?
Yes, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so is it my turn to speak?
Yeah, okay, go for now, and then
I'll just drop like one link on the chat. So I'm just gonna very briefly introduce. This is part of my I don't know, the speculative design practice, and this is a text that is very casual and personal. That was written. I mean, it is initiated by watching a video of Bear Grylls, like the British adventurer, like smashing the bats that are like being accused as like virus carriers in this outbreak, and it started like, I mean, it's an investigation that started from like the dichotomy between Bear Grylls, this lovingly white man like that conquers nature, versus bat that is seemingly disease carrying, non-white, not specifically male, and yeah. So I'm not gonna explain a lot about the text here, but I just want y'all to, I don't know, if you have a time later, just give it a look, and like if you find it interesting, just feel free to like reach me.
I give it a look and it sounds amazing, so interesting. Thank you for your work. Younes?
Yes.
Yeah.
So let me reply on your statement that I'm hacking and experimenting with my body. I will post a link later on which is related to this. So actually, most likely I've had corona. I got notified like 10 days ago that my bodily statistics, which I monitor for the last 2 years quite carefully, went up. My sleep score went down, my heart rate went up, my heart rate variability went down, my temperature increased. So I was already like more or less aware that something was going to happen to me quite quickly. So at the same time, I started taking precautions with different varieties of supplements and oxygen and ozone therapy. And then at some point I did get like an asthmatic bronchitis attack quite intensely for a couple of hours, which I was capable of treating with the supplements and and some exercises. But actually, the scariest thing of all this was not necessarily that I experienced this, is that when I start looking into the technology that made me aware of this, and I was always quite critical of this, that now this is being rolled out in San Francisco in 2,000 hospitals in combination with the Mark Zuckerberg hospital. So this is the moment where Silicon Valley is moving into the 20% of the economy of healthcare. And so we talked a lot about the data and about the capitalist implications of this virus, but this is also when the tech world is taking over the medical world, and this takeover is happening right now. Yuval Harari wrote an interesting article about it last week as well. So this is something I would point out. This is the September 11th of securitization of medical data. If there are any questions or if I was completely unclear, please let me know.
Yes, actually, you're experiencing something. I mean, the interesting thing is that you're carrying on research on that. So it's
Mm-hmm.
since a long time. So the COVID just arrived in a moment where you are completely tracking the most of you can of your biological life, and so you can in some way control the virus and decide also how much you want to be. What kind of contagion do you prefer? Because you cannot avoid it, actually. Nobody can avoid it, but you can control it somehow. That's quite kind of interesting. Using the technology, embedding in you have already embedded technology yourself consciously.
Yeah.
You wanted to do that. And so you
Yes.
the virus with the technology, with your biological, but of course there's no difference between these three realms, and it's just a way of
yeah, but technology is only that's the thing that making you aware to be able to reach your own body, while actually the hacking takes place through simple measurements as exercise and food, which is its own information for your body to function differently as well. So the technology is really, again, not the solution. It's just a measure to be able to understand and read your body or the environment. But I would say don't focus too much on the technology, but really more on your own relationship with your skin, started how the bacteria, everything's communicating through your body. I can go on in much more details in another session or seminar, but for now I will post a link of the ring that I'm using, and I would actually recommend you not to use it because it doesn't really make sense to start using it now, because it only shows you the data of what your normal data is. So if you would use it now, it means that your normal would start in a stress situation and you actually have not good measurements.
Okay, thank you. I agree. Let's not start now. But it's fantastic that you are constructivist in your own way of being, actually.
Thank you.
It's this radical constructivism, which is Haraway's, actually, saying there's no nature. There's no nature. Human is an invention, is a representation, and so is gender, and so on and so on. So you're pushing it to your personal extreme, this way of thinking. And COVID is obliging us to do that too, because in a way now we are completely dependent on technologies, even more than before. So it's like extensions of our bodies, and connections between humans and non-humans, technologies, and living beings. Yeah, it's forcing us to think about that and to do it very rapidly in an accelerated way. Is there some comment? Is there someone who wants to say something? Okay, well, I think we can stop right here. I thank you very much for your participation. And I tell you, see you next week, next Thursday, for next seminar, who will be introduced by a resident, a SIS resident, 𝘚𝘵𝘐𝘍𝑜𝘦, who was here before. And so you will receive, please, if you didn't receive our mails, or if you didn't register on our website, please write here your email addresses so you can receive the announcement for next seminar, next Thursday. And yeah, if nobody wants to add anything. No? Lisa? Unmute? Okay. Sorry, it's mute. Okay.
Everyone, oops, can you hear me now?
Yes, definitely.
Thank you everyone for making this first seminar a success. I know that we're all very distant from one another, but I noticed that Susanna and Luca, who are in the same house, have just joined together. That makes me very happy.
Yeah,
you back the time of Zoom, so I passed in the Susanna dimension. Yeah.
Okay, it's a miracle of Zoom. Okay, we'll try and do the same ourselves, hopefully. Okay. Thanks again for your time. Yes, please leave all of your emails, as Francesca has mentioned. We would love to have you follow along on the next SIS seminar.
Thank you, everyone. Ciao.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Take care, okay? Ciao.
Ciao a tutti. Ciao.
Have a nice evening, everyone.